part of an interview, I really want you to start thinking about an interview in a broader way. And I really believe that every contact from the moment you apply for a position is part of your interview. Every interaction that you have, every electronic interaction, every in-person, face-to-face, every phone call, that's all part of your interview. And I want you to start thinking like a hiring manager. So just for example, if an employer has 10 open positions and 20 people apply for each position, that's 200 applications at one time that that person has to manage. So you can imagine that that takes a lot of time, and opinions are formed very quickly. And I'm sure that you know that in your personal life. You meet someone, and it doesn't take us very long to make a judgment. Now that judgment may be wrong, and you may find out after you spend time with the person that they're not what you thought. But in this scenario, we're making snap judgments, and then you never have that chance to follow up. So if I'm going through a pile of resumes, and I see something that is incorrect or a lot of typos, I'm going to put that in the no pile, and I'm not going to come back to it. So you don't have that chance to make another impression. So you really have to think about and carefully think about what you're doing all along the way. So just what I want you to think about too is don't waste your first impression. You just get that one chance, and with a hiring manager, a lot of times that's the only chance that you'll get. So some details to consider, and I'm going to keep saying the word details because I really believe that it's the small little things that will very often exclude you from being included in a process. So some things to consider. Did you take the time to make sure that your resume is relevant and professional? So that resume, that's what's representing you. And if at the very top you have typos, sometimes the person won't even get all the way through. You know, think back again what we said, 200 applications to manage at one time. That's a lot, and it takes a lot of time. So just making sure that it's relevant and professional. Ensuring that the qualifications meet the requirements of the position. So if you're just applying for jobs and you're applying for a job and your qualifications don't make any sense, you know, if I'm looking at it and I think, well, this person doesn't have any experience for this position, that can be really confusing, and again, you're just going to set it aside. So you have to really make sure that what you're applying for makes sense, and if you are trying something new, maybe just starting in your career, make sure that in that cover letter you're addressing what you're doing. So, you know, maybe saying I'm making a switch to a different career and I've taken these classes that would prepare me for that. So really tie that in and give me the reason why it doesn't make sense on paper. And then did you follow the instructions in the job advertisement? And I will tell you that with our interview committees, this is probably the biggest thing that gets people excluded from getting to the actual meeting interview piece. And again, if we're looking at the interview being everything from the moment you send in your resume, we have very specific instructions for what you need to do and how you need to apply for the position. And when people don't give us all the pieces that we're asking for, so you know, we ask for a cover letter, 3 letters of recommendation, transcripts and those pieces. So if we have a pile of resumes and there's 20 people and 15 of them are qualified, we're automatically going to exclude the people who didn't follow the instructions and give us everything that we need. Because again, we have to make those judgments and decisions quickly. And then a couple of don'ts. So don't drop off your resume to the hiring manager wearing ratty sweats and fuzzy ducky slippers. And don't stare at your phone and not pay attention when you're interacting with the employer or their staff. So even if you're not seeing the hiring manager, if you're dropping off a resume to a receptionist or a staff person, if you think that you come in and make a bad impression and they won't share that with the hiring manager, you're wrong, because they absolutely will. And those people are very often integral, the frontline people are integral in helping us make our decisions. So don't waste that first impression, because again, this is all part of how I see an interview. So a couple more things to just think about and be careful about. Proceed with caution if you plan to send out mass mailings of your resume. Now, I get it. When you're starting out in your career, or sometimes you've maybe lost a job and you need a job quickly, I understand that it's really tempting to just apply for whatever's out there. But if you are doing that, make sure that you're taking the time to, you know, don't copy and paste and then you've applied for another job title or another employer and sent it to another employer, because that just, it appears like you don't care. So just be careful doing that. Proceed with caution if you plan to apply for multiple positions with one employer. And I see this a lot. It really confuses our interview committees and hiring managers. If someone applies for 4 positions that we have open and they're not closely related, it feels to the hiring manager like the person doesn't know what they want, or they don't really care, they're just looking for a job, it doesn't matter which position they're applying for. So that being said, sometimes you do want to apply for 2 positions with an employer, but just really think it through and make sure that what you're doing makes sense, because you might be excluding yourself from all of them by applying for so many. And very often what will happen is if a resume comes in and the person has applied for something that's different and I think that they might fit into their position, I will contact them and say, hey, are you interested in this? As opposed to just sending us and applying for everything that we have.
Lisa, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Being on sitting on a committee,
Yes.
One of the things that really throws me off more than anything else is when they will use their reference letters from some other position. So one committee I was sitting on, we were looking for somebody to be on the staff here, and all the reference letters related to them being a teacher. So it was like, it was almost offensive to me that they thought just because someone thought they could be a teacher, they could also do this job, you know, and it was like you said, they didn't pay attention to the details. And that really put me off. It was just, I wasn't interested in talking to them at that point.
You don't want to waste your time going through the rest of their materials,
Right.
because you could tell they don't care.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's a great point. And please feel free to stop with questions or anything as we go. So the next one, that proceed with caution if you plan to call, email, or visit the employer repeatedly. Now, I will tell you, I know when I was in school, my instructors told me, you know, make sure you go, hand it in person, call and follow up, let them know they're interested. And I'm just telling you that as a hiring manager, there's a fine line between doing that and being professional and calling every day and just stopping by every day and asking questions and pushing for information, because sometimes I don't have it, sometimes I can't share that information with the candidate, and it gets really annoying. And then you start to imagine that person, gosh, what if they worked here? What would they be like as an employee when they're this needy and this pushy? So just really, there's a fine line there. So you want to be professional, show that you care, but you don't want to annoy people or take a lot of their time. And then the last thing I would just caution against is using gimmicks. So like personal photos on resumes, scented paper on resumes, a bunch of personal information about all the stuff you like to do in your free time. It just can be really, it can just put you off, and it can make you make a decision about that person that might not really be valid. But again, it's just, some of that stuff is just too much. So just think about, you want to set yourself apart, but you also want to be professional and make sure that you're not becoming annoying with what you're doing. And then the last piece in this section is just, don't forget the contact details. So we have a great resume, we want to contact you, and then I try to call you and your voicemail's not set up, or your voicemail's full and I can't leave a message. And I don't have time or the energy to keep calling repeatedly, so I just want to make sure that you have that set up. So when you've applied for jobs, make sure that you're ready to receive that call if they want to call you. Make sure that your voicemail greeting is professional. You know, the ones where you call and they act like they're answering, but they're like, just kidding, I'm really not answering, whatever. That's just really annoying. It takes a lot of time. And again, it makes you make a decision about the person that they just don't take things seriously. And again, sometimes that's not true, but it feels that way. So you just want to be professional. Have your name on there so that I know if, you know, even just your first name, you've reached Sarah, then I know, okay, I can leave a message because I got the right number, I didn't dial the wrong thing, so just making sure that I have the right person. And then just make sure you use a professional email address. So if you have a cutesy one with some clever address, use that for your friends, but just get a normal Gmail. I really just recommend first name dot last name, whatever, just something that's simple and easy to spell, nothing too long, because again, you're trying to send an email and you want to make sure, oh, was that supposed to be a 1 or an L? I don't know. You know, so just making sure that it's easy for the person to contact you. And social media presence, and I'm sure that you hear this a lot from a lot of different sources, but it's very, very important. You have a social media presence, I'm sure you do. It may be broader or less broad than a lot of people's, but just make sure that you use it with care. Set your accounts to private, think before you post. Some employers will use this information to make decisions about you. Now there are some legal areas where this can be difficult, and a lot of employers don't, but a lot of employers do. And just a lot of hiring managers, a lot of people on committees, they'll look the person up and just see what they can see. And again, make a really quick judgment that may not be true. Okay, so let's talk about you. So we've gotten through that whole first piece. Your resume was good, they called you, they want to meet with you. So when the employer wants to meet with you, what should you do? You have to prepare. I don't recommend ever going into an interview and winging it. Even if you're really far along in your career and you feel like you have some great examples, you need to prepare because you need to show that employer that you do care and that you took the time to prepare about it. Research the employer so that you can relate your skills to what they're looking for. So go to their website. There could be a lot of really good information there. What's the employer's mission statement? I think that that's really important, just understanding what is the main purpose of that employer. Not that you have to memorize it and be able to recite it, but that you can really get a feel for what's their goal, what are they trying to do. Find 1 or 2 facts or details about the employer that interest you, something that you could use in the interview. Try to learn about the position that you're applying for and how it fits with the employer's structure. View an org chart if available. Just if you know someone that works there, you might just say, hey, can we go to lunch, get some information, maybe some things that they're working on or where the organization is. And just basically show the employer that you care about the position. So as far as the interview, make sure that the schedule details work for you. So will you need to travel to the interview site? Maybe you have class or you have another job that you currently have and you'll have to take time off to go to that. Make sure you think about all those things. Coming late to an interview is one of the worst things that you can do. Even if you have a good reason, it just sets a really, really poor tone. Well, you need to change clothing before or after the interview. So maybe your current job, you have a certain uniform that you have to wear, but you wouldn't want to wear that to your interview. So do you need to be able to change? You need to make sure you factor all those things in. We're doing a lot of interviews now just using technology, so Skype or phone interviews, things like that. So if you've never used Skype before, make sure that you practice doing that before the interview. Find out what medium the interview will be on and then know what you're doing. Because again, if you can't get signed in the day of the interview or anything like that, just make sure you know how to use what you need to use. If it's going to be a phone interview, make sure that you can take the call in an area where there won't be interruptions. Make sure that you're going to be in an area where you'll have good cell service. That can really be a challenge if you can't hear the answers that the person's giving. They may be really good, but the breaking in and out, again, that can just make you form an opinion that may not be true. So be prepared to talk about you. You really need to be specific. Prepare to discuss some successful work, school, or volunteer projects. And I really recommend write down 5 to 10 specific scenarios where you were successful. So something where you were innovative, or maybe where you learned a lesson and there was a failure. That's fine too, as long as you show that you learned a lesson and where you went from there. Anything where you made a positive impact. And then you'll use those scenarios in the interview to answer the questions. Any questions so far? Anything else you want to add, Grace?
Good stuff.
Okay. And then the last piece is practice. And I really think you have to practice. And I know it sounds silly or it sounds strange to actually sit down and say the words out loud, but that's what I always do anytime that I've done an interview, and I think that it can be really, really successful. Ask a friend to help you practice. Find a mentor or someone from work or church or wherever who you feel like they know you and they would be a good role model for you to work with. Or find another small group of job seekers and help each other and just actually go through some mock interview questions. And the next slide is just a piece of advice that I have for you is just be you. So I think there's always this tendency to want to make ourselves look fabulous and sell ourselves a certain way. And while we want to put ourselves in our best light and our best foot forward, you have to remember that if you get the job, you're going to have to be that person. So don't sell yourself as something that you're not, or don't try to be something you're not. Just, you have to be yourself. Be honest and genuine and sincere. I have a meter that I can tell if people are lying, or I feel like I can. And so when I pick that up from someone in an interview, that is a big red flag to me. So just be honest, be genuine, be sincere. Display your skills in a positive way and be confident. So those things are really important. But again, don't pretend to be something that you're not. Be careful to be arrogant, because again, if they hire you, you're gonna have to back up what you're saying. So just make sure you can do that. And then the last piece that I just want to go through is some common interview questions, and I want you to think about what the interviewer is trying to learn about you. And I think that'll help you answer the questions. So the first question is, tell me about your strengths. And I think that this question is probably asked in some form in nearly every interview. So it's really important to know what you're going to say to that question. So tell me about your strengths. What is the interviewer trying to find out? So they want to know, what are your best skills and how might you fit with their existing team? Are you confident and able to speak about your skills and abilities? And do you have the skills and abilities to do the advertised job? So how can you prepare to answer this question? The first one is you have to know your strengths. And this is a really important skill as you go through your career, is knowing what you're good at, because that's where you're going to succeed. Of course, we have to work on the things that are challenges, but we have to know what we're good at. So if you're not sure what your strengths are, you need to talk to mentors, friends. Think about, what's your best quality? What do people tell you? Oh, that's the best part of you. And where are you most successful? Because that's probably where your strengths will lie. Think about a specific answer to this question or a similar question, because like I said, it's very likely to come up. And then here, I just wrote some example answers to kind of give you an idea of how you might answer it. So the example for tell me about your strengths is, my greatest strength is helping people. I love interacting with a variety of people, and I've learned so many lessons through my volunteer work at Mitchell Elementary School. I believe this experience would help me with the customer service aspect of this position. So you've outlined, what is my best skill, where have I demonstrated that skill, and how am I going to bring it to this position? Any questions about that?
What if your skills don't really apply to the job?
Okay, that's a great question. So they do. I promise you that whatever your strengths are, you can tie them to that job. It might be a stretch, and it might be hard to think about. Can you give me an example, like a skill that you can think of that? Not really?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
You're very artistic. That's
Artistic or
yeah.
creative.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
So creative is a great, so artistic, maybe some people wouldn't get. So I wouldn't necessarily use that word, but creative is an awesome word. Because no matter what job you have, I don't care what it is, creative to me means that you will keep searching until you find something that works. That you don't just see this one way. Creative means you see this broad, huge picture, and you know how to bring that back to life. So I think that you just have to really find the right word and then try to think of a specific example. So, I don't know what you'd be talking about. Try to think of a job that maybe do you have a specific example that you were thinking about? Because I'd be happy to talk those through with you.
Say I was applying to a clothing store.
Okay, great. So what I would say is you could use your creativity to help build displays or to help customers pick out outfits. So a lot of people don't have any idea what colors could go together or what belt to use or those kind of things. So I think that you could talk about what you know about color as an artist and what you know about flow of materials and things like that. And then talk about how you like to work with people, or if you do, and how you could help translate that skill then to helping people when they come into the store to put together something that when they leave they feel really good wearing it. Okay? All right, so then the flip side of that question that again almost always comes up is, what is your greatest weakness? And what the interviewer really wants to know is, do you bring a problem to the employment that they can't overcome? So we all have weaknesses, and we all know we have weaknesses, but is your weakness something that's going to really be a problem for that employer? The other thing they're looking for is, are you honest? Will you give a specific example of something that is truly a weakness, or will you give the I'm a perfectionist answer? Because I tell you, that is what everyone says, that they're a perfectionist. And I really think that answer is kind of a cop-out. No offense if you guys give that answer. I think you have to really try to find something to share. You just be honest. You don't want to take it too far and make it seem like you're going to be a problem employee, but again, they're looking for you to be genuine and honest. And then the last thing they're looking for is, are you self-aware? So do you get that you have weaknesses and you need to work on them? Because some people honestly don't understand that, and they're very difficult to have as employees. So you just want to know, are they paying attention? Do they know what's going on? So how can you prepare to answer this question? The biggest thing that I would do, honestly, and this is throughout your career, is just get regular feedback from people you trust. Incorporate people in your life who will be honest and give you constructive feedback. And whether that's in your personal life or your work life, you have to always be looking at the things that you need to do better. Be honest, give a real answer, and show how you're working to improve. So here's another example that I wrote for this question. In a team situation, because I love solving problems, I can sometimes get ahead of myself and take action before others in the group are ready to move forward. I've learned to listen more carefully and to discuss the plan with the group before taking action. This approach helped greatly during a recent student council project. So there you show what the issue is, that you understand why you have that issue, and that how you applied it recently in your life, you know, how you're working to fix it and how you've applied it. Do you have any ideas on this one that you want to talk about?
What if your weakness is something, so your greatest weakness, what if it's something that is like really like weak and
Do you want to share an example? You don't have to if you don't want
okay,
to.
so say I was working with, it's a customer service and you have to talk to customers a lot. So what if you're not great at communicating?
Okay, so what I would kind of try to break that down. So what is your issue? Is it that you're shy? Is it that you're afraid what they're going to say? You know, kind of really drill down to what is the problem. Is it that you don't like people? Or is it that, you know, you're, whatever it is, kind of drill down a little bit. And then again, I would just try to tie that back to how you're working on it, things that you've done to overcome that. So maybe what it is that you're actually afraid to speak in public. And you don't have to say that that's what your issue is, but you could say, you know, I'm nervous about speaking in public, so I recently took a public speaking class, and it really helped me to improve. Or, you know, always try to follow up the weakness with that you're aware of it, you understand where it comes from, and this is how you're trying to fix it. And if you can give an example like that of, you know, I took this class, or I joined this group, or whatever. Just, I think that's what I'm always looking for with weaknesses, is that they get it, and they're working on it. Yeah. Because that's always going to be your weakness, right? I mean, I've never seen a person who this was their greatest weakness and all of a sudden it was their most amazing strength, because that's, our weaknesses and strengths are based in our personality and all of that, and so it's probably not going to change. So just that you understand it and you're working on it. Okay? All right, so this is another one. Why do you want to leave your current job? And I think this sounds pretty simple, right? You just tell them why you want to leave. But this question tells so much. So what is the interviewer trying to find out about you? Well, first they're looking at what's your career path. So if I hire you, is this something that you just want to do here for like 6 months to a year to get experience and move on? You know, how does this position align with what you're trying to do? How do you speak about your current and former employers? That's how you'll probably speak about us someday if you come and work for us and leave. So if you're really negative about them, that's probably how you'll be about us someday. And then, do you plan to leave in a professional manner? And can I trust that someday, if and when you leave us, that you won't leave us high and dry? You'll give notice, you'll do what you need to do. So those are kind of all the things that we're analyzing when we're asking that question. So how can you prepare? And this is just a piece of advice, and it's my opinion, but I say never ever speak about your former employer in a negative way. It doesn't matter, your boss could have been the biggest jerk on the planet, the company could have been totally corrupt and terrible. Don't ever speak about your employers, your previous employers in a negative way, because it just makes the person start to question, is it you, or is it really the employer, or was it you? And I just think it's best to leave that stuff in the past. So be honest about why you want to leave, but do it in a professional way. So here's the example for this question. To just say that I've learned so much from my current position while I've worked through college, and now I've gained some great lifelong mentors, and I'm excited to demonstrate everything I've learned in a new and challenging environment. So you're saying you appreciated what you learned there, and some of the stuff at your previous job, maybe it really was terrible, but there was surely something good that you got out of that, even if it was a lesson learned from being in that terrible environment. So you want to take those good things, and you're excited to bring that to the new job. Anything you want to add on this one? Okay. The next one, what are your salary expectations? And this can be such a challenging question to answer, because you don't want to say something too low and then the employer's like, yes, maybe that person's super cheap. You don't want to say it too high and then they think, well, we'll never be able to get to that salary number, so I guess we have to put her in the no list. So this one's really tough. So what is the interviewer trying to find out? They first want to know, do you understand the level of responsibility? So, if we're interviewing for an executive level position and you're asking for $12.50 an hour, that shows me that you do not understand what this position is about. The other one is, can we negotiate a salary with you that will fit our budgetary needs? And then, are you willing to negotiate, and where is your bottom line? So again, you have to be honest. If you have a minimum number, like maybe you know that you can't survive on anything less than, $30,000 a year, and you know that no matter what they say, you will not come below that number, then I would say that. I would give them that number and say, this is my absolute bottom line. I couldn't take this job for less than that, because you don't want to waste their time and waste your time. So sometimes that happens, and you just know I can't take less than that. So here's a couple answers and ways that you could answer that one. So if we both determine that I'm the best fit for this position, I'm sure we can come to an agreement. So that's kind of a way of pushing that back and not giving a number, and honestly that's probably what I recommend, is to not give a number. But sometimes the employer will push and say, I really need you to give me a range. So you need to be prepared to do that. So that's where the second part of this comes in. So you might say, I know that the average wage for similar positions in this area is $15.50 per hour, so I would want to be in that range to reflect the value of my education, skills, and training. So now, to come up with that number, you're going to have done some research to understand where salary ranges fall, and that can be really difficult. So this, I will tell you, is not a simple or easy question to answer. Sometimes it can be really tough. You might find that salary data, other positions that are posted, sometimes employers post salaries with the posting. We don't do that at WNCC, but you might see that. If you have a friend who works in that field, or someone that you can ask, hey, can you give me a range, what you think the salaries, or what this position's worth, something like that. So, any questions about this one?
Hey, Lisa, have you ever had anybody call that has applied and asked you, like over the phone, for a range after they've applied? Because I know I've done that.
Yes.
And they've given it to me over the phone, even though they didn't state it
Yes.
on the application.
Yes, and we do typically, depending on the position, but typically we will give out the range. So that is another option of what you can do. Try to get the salary range. And what's nice about that too is I always give the salary when we're scheduling an interview, just to know if we're completely out of line. Let's not waste our time doing an interview. Let's not waste your time. Let's not waste our time. But all employers aren't going to do that. Everybody does things differently. But yeah, that's definitely a way. And they may say, I'm sorry, but our salaries are confidential and we don't give that out. But it's worth a try.
So if they don't ask the salary question, is it okay or not okay to say in the interview, how much does, this position pay? Is that okay, or is that taboo?
It's not taboo. I think you just want to be careful doing that, and when you do it and how you do it.
Good.
I think you also have to feel how the interview is going and if they're receptive to talking about that. You have to really kind of read, and if you do bring it up and they're like, and you can tell they don't want to talk about it, I wouldn't push, because you don't want to come off like the only thing you care about is money. Now, I get it. As a hiring manager, we work for money. Most people work maybe not solely for money, but it's very important. And so I completely understand wanting to know that salary, but you have to understand that sometimes from the employer side, we either can't give that information, or we've been directed not to, or there are some other factors behind the scenes. Maybe the final salary hasn't been determined yet. So all of that. I think the time for negotiating salary to me is more at the time of the offer. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Just, that's the time when you can really say, okay, you're interested in me, I'm interested in you, this is where I need to be. And then you can kind of go through that process.
We did have an interviewee one time. I thought they handled it really well. It was towards the end, and it was when they said, do you have any questions for us? And they said, well, I have the opportunity to speak with someone about the income. And
that's a great way to put it.
Just the way they handled it,
That's
I thought was fantastic.
So you're not putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
They could say, no, I'm sorry.
And they could have said, well, we won't be doing that till then.
Yeah.
But it didn't make any of us in the room uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
So it was just, will I have the opportunity to visit with someone about the wages and that kind of thing after this meeting?
And then as an interviewer, you didn't feel confronted by that or like put on the spot. So that's a great
I learned a lot from that one statement. It taught me a lot.
One. All right. Why do you want this job and why should we hire you? So that's kind of the same question. Again, this comes up a lot. The interviewer is giving you a chance to show them. So to sort of tie it all together, tell me why I should make this decision. Because sometimes these decisions are really difficult. Okay. Sometimes these decisions are really difficult. And if you can help me make that decision, show me why we should make this decision, it can make it so much easier. And then they're just, they want to understand what they're looking, I'm sorry, do you understand what they're looking for, and can you deliver that? So how can you prepare? So really think about, why do you want this job? What do you like about the employer? What do you think will be the most successful, where will you be the most successful in the position? So the answer for this one, as I've studied and learned about healthcare for the last 2 years, I focused on the day when I would be able to work with patients and help them achieve their health goals. This position will afford me the opportunity to begin my healthcare career, and I'm excited about the possibility of sharing what I've learned and expanding my experience. So you're addressing that you're just starting out, you're new to the healthcare field, but you've learned a lot and you're ready to share that, and you know that you have more to learn. So just kind of tying that all together. What about this one? Anything you want to add or ask about this one? Any other of you? And then the next question is the infamous, do you have any questions for us? Like what Grace was just talking about. So the interviewer wants to know, do you understand the position? And then they want to make sure you understand. And then are there any questions that came up during the course of the interview? So sometimes something will be uncovered. Maybe you'll ask some questions and the person had no idea that that was going to be part of the position. And so before they leave and before you maybe come back and make an offer, you want to make sure that they know what's going on here. So how can you prepare? If you have questions, ask them. So maybe beforehand you had a list of questions that you wanted to go through, some things you wanted to do. If you have genuine questions, I would ask them. But it's okay to say that you don't have any questions. And don't just make some up just for the sake of, like, you read it on an interviewing website that you should always ask the employer questions. Because I just don't think that's genuine. Again, be honest, be genuine. If there's a question that you have, something you want to know, ask them. But if you could just say, you know, I think we covered everything in the interview. I had a couple of things, but we went over them in an earlier question, and I think I'm good now. So the other thing that you might ask, and here's the example, is would you please tell me about the next steps in this process and when I might expect to hear back from you? So I think it's always good when you're leaving the interview to get some sort of commitment from the hiring manager as to what's going to happen next. Now, what may happen next is that they'll completely blow you off and you'll never hear anything, and that can be really frustrating. But if you can get them to commit to, you know, we have some other interviews to do, it'll be the end of next week, but you'll get a letter from us, or I will call you either way, or whatever their process is. I think usually if you can get someone to commit, they'll probably stick to what they said. Any questions on that?
What if you, because like during the interview you have like all these things going on and then just like disappear with all your questions that you had. So what if you think of the questions after the interview?
Okay, so you want to go back to follow the instructions of what they told you. So hopefully during the interview, so that's one of the things that I do usually, or maybe the person leading the committee will do, is say, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. When I call to set up the interviews, I always tell them, if you have any questions, this is my number. If anything happens with the interview, let me know. And I think it's perfectly fine if you've established that contact and relationship with someone there, whoever it is, to either call or email and say, after the interview, I had some time to think about some things that we said, and here are a couple of additional questions, and just get those answered. Okay?
And there's nothing wrong with, when they ask you if you have any questions, there is nothing wrong with saying, just take a moment, look at the questions I had, make sure I feel comfortable that I've covered everything. We have this instinct, I do, to have a response instantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's never always the best way to go. Take that time, look at your list, they know what you're doing. I've had a lot of interviewees that actually write notes during the interview. That doesn't bother me. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but it doesn't bother me because it tells me they're interested or they have something that's worth them jotting that down. So then they can go back and look and say, well, when we were speaking earlier, you had mentioned this and I just wanted to follow up.
Yep.
You know, I like that. I like to see that they thought enough about it to think a little bit further into it and want a little more information. So just that one thing of always going, no, I don't think I have any. Don't get yourself worked up to the point where you think you have to have an answer instantly. If you need to say it, say it. Say, I need just a moment to check my list.
It's the same thing with the interview question. There's sometimes you will get asked some question and it will be so out of the blue, and this has happened to me. And I remember one time I said, wow, that is a really good question. And
Yeah.
it just bought me a moment to stop and think about what I wanted to say. Or to just, you don't even have to say anything, but just take a moment, have a thoughtful, try not to look confused or scared, but, just kind of think about it for a second, take a breath, and like Grace said, don't be, like, I have to answer right now. Just think a second and take a breath and answer.
And
the
a lot
question.
of times they'll offer you a cup of water. Take a drink.
Yeah, because we understand, we've all
Because your
been through
mouth
interviews.
gets dry, it gives you
Right.
time to slow down just a little tiny bit. That cup of water can save you, I think, sometimes, just.
Yep, buy you just a couple seconds
Yes.
to let your brain
Yes.
catch up to what you're doing. So those are some of the really common questions, basic, common, simple. But there are obviously hundreds of other possible questions. So what can you do? That feels really overwhelming, right? So before the interview, research questions for your specific field. So I will tell you that depending on the field that you're going into, the job that you're trying to get, the questions could vary a lot. So different careers, different fields are gonna ask different things, but there are so many resources online. Just Google, retail interview questions, education interview questions, whatever, and just read through them and then just kind of in your mind think about those 5 scenarios that we thought about earlier from your volunteer work and your education and your work where you're innovative and you learned something. Okay, how can I tie one of those scenarios to this question or a question like this? And just really be prepared so when they ask you, you'll be prepared with to know what you want to say. In the interview, listen carefully to the question and use one of your prepared scenarios. So like we just said, pause for a moment, compose yourself, and then answer the question. It's not a race, it's really not a contest. And like I said a minute ago, we all understand. I know what it's like to be nervous in an interview. I know what it's like to be starting out in my career. I know what it's like to really want this job so bad, you don't want anything to go wrong, that you're kind of tongue-tied for a second. So that's totally fine. We're human, we understand. And then just the last piece with the questions is if the question seems really wacky, so like, if you were an animal, what kind of
I
animal
was
would you
hoping you
be?
would say that.
What's that?
I was really hoping you would bring that up.
So a question like that,
They'll do that to you.
I don't like those questions, but what they're trying to find out is, are you creative? What kind of an answer are you gonna give to this? So be creative. Come up with a creative answer. Try to, again, tie it back to the position, but just give them a creative answer that they're looking for. Any questions about those?
The other fun one is if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And why? Now,
It's like-
I could say what kind of tree, because that's easy, but why? So it's a good idea to think of things like
Yeah,
this.
just the silly kind of different, I call them
Because you
wacky.
get hit with them, and there's a reason they're asking them.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just because they're messing with you, I think. Okay, that was my opinion.
All right.
Usually they, like you said, they do want to see if you are spontaneous, if you're creative. When they ask the tree question to me, they're looking to say, I'd like to be able to support, or I would like to be able to give comfort or shade, or, just showing what kind of, a little character.
Yeah,
You know.
character, yeah.
So,
So are there any other interview questions that you've had or that you're worried about that you'd like to go through? Just a couple minutes, a few minutes here. Is there something that I could help you prepare for? And if you two have any really hard ones that you've had at some point that you thought, man, I don't know how to answer that.
What if you're not experienced in the field or in that job, but you want to become experienced into the job?
Okay, that's great, and that's a lot of what we're talking about here. I think the first thing is understanding that they know from looking at your resume that you weren't experienced, so they know what they're getting from you. What they're looking for is, do you have training? Do you have education? Do you show the desire to learn the new position? So I think that those are the things that I would focus on is classes that you've taken, maybe just even some volunteer work that you did in that area, even if it doesn't directly relate to the position, but something that you can kind of tie back to skills that you learned there. What are the things that they're really looking for in the job, and how can you tie something that you've done back to those skills? I think just willingness to learn too, willingness to take feedback, willingness to take correction. Criticism I don't think is really the word, but just I want to learn, I want to grow, I'm excited to start this new career is what I would really focus on.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
You two have anything? Okay, I just have one more slide. So these are just final thoughts about interviewing in general. So prepare, be honest, and most importantly, be yourself. If you get the job, be a good employee, that's a whole nother discussion, but you have to remember that you are building your career. No matter what you're doing, beginning jobs while you're going to college, those are all part of your career, and you're building that, something that you're gonna have for a lot of years, so just be a good employee. If you don't get the job, be gracious. Learn from the process and make notes for future interviews. Don't give up. So one of the things that I do is everyone that we interview that we don't hire, I personally call them and tell them that we did not hire them. And I will tell you that that is the worst part of my job. So if you, on your end, are gracious and understand how that person might be feeling, also appreciating that they took that time to contact you, because like we said before, a lot of employers will just blow you off, you will hear nothing, and you will never know what happened. So be gracious.
Okay, so I just thought of something.
Sure.
So, this summer I was looking for a job, and I applied, and I went in, but I had classes that I was taking,
Mhm.
so I was looking for something that would like work around my schedule, and so, but then also like work with theirs. So, is it okay like asking for like if they work well like around schedules and stuff?
I think it's important to do that, because you don't want to say, oh yeah, I can work anytime, it's no problem. Don't, you know, I'll work weekends, nights, whatever. And then you actually start and you say, well, actually, the truth is, I really can't work on Tuesdays at all. I can't work Saturday nights. And then we've hired you with an understanding, and you come in and you can't fulfill what you said you could fulfill. So that creates a really tough situation. Ultimately, if they say, I'm sorry, but we can't work around your schedule, it's not the job for you. Now, that may be hard to swallow, and you may really need that job, you may really want that job, but in the end, you know it's not gonna work out. Unless you're willing to change your schedule, it's not gonna work out. So I would just be honest about those things.
So, I guess what happened, so I had told them that I would be able to work like during the afternoons, but not evenings. And so, or either weekends. So I was upfront about what I could work, and then they said that they could work with that. And so the second day I come in, they decided that they didn't want me or something. So like, how would you go about that?
So it sounds to me like you did what you needed to do. You were upfront and you were honest. Sometimes employers aren't good employers, or sometimes it's not a good fit. So yeah, I think it sounds like you did what you needed to do from the interviewing piece, and then sometimes, unfortunately, positions just don't work out.
Yeah. Okay.
I know it's not a great answer, but sometimes that's just the truth.
Yes.
Okay, and then the last thing is just to always keep your resume updated as you move through your career, so that you have those details down for the next time you need to interview. And you really never know when that's going to be. And I just recommend that in your career you're always prepared to do an interview, because you might want a promotion with the same company, you might have to move suddenly with your family and look for another position. So just to always keep it updated and be prepared. Okay?
Okay.
That's it.